Hey everyone, it is Thursday, and you know what that means. We bring back our expert, Jonathan Twomley. How you doing, sir?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing very, very well. It seems like all our Thursday sessions, luck of the draw, we get to talk about new unemployment claims, which came out today. 870K on an expectation of 850. Most people are calling it a miss. I want to call it a dangerous trend that we're on. Was curious what you thought of all that.
Yeah, so I looked at that data and what I what I think, so 20,000 more claims than what was expected. It's not good, but I'm not surprised by it either,
Mm-hmm.
given that school is reopening, people are going back, and we're starting to have pretty serious surges in a number of coronavirus cases out there. I think I read the other day, now we have 22 states reporting substantial rises in the last week,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, some places are actually, like Europe, getting back to their peaks from March.
Yeah.
So the idea that simply because unemployment benefits have run out, that means that people are going to go back to work, um, just doesn't seem to take into account the impact of COVID and whether people actually have a workplace to go back to.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I think what we're seeing now, for the last 4 weeks, we've seen the unemployment number just bouncing around
Mm-hmm.
this same figure, right?
Yep.
Around this kind of like band of the high 800,000s of new claims. That looks to me awfully like a bottom.
Yep.
And, uh, which is what you and I have been predicting all along, right?
Yes.
Right. That unless we really whipped COVID, which we haven't done,
Mm-mm.
we're going to get a second wave, and we're going to see this happening all over again. And
Yep.
uh, and so I think that's what we're seeing right now.
Well, here's the reality. These are weekly numbers that come out, but we've got kind of three or four, I don't know, negative variables that I actually think, and I want to put it on record now, that way people can say you got it or you missed it. I think we're going to get back over 1 million unemployment claims by the second or third week of October because schools are reopening, which is causing issues. It's getting colder in lots of parts of the country, so this whole eating outside thing is going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
You have the PPP money running out for, like the airlines, their bailout ends October 1st. Huge furloughs coming there or layoffs coming. And I still think we're kind of in that negative feedback loop, right? Again, I'm just trying to tie all these data points that I read about every day, right? Accenture missed, right, which is a big consulting arm. They missed their consulting was down 8%, which tells me that their customers, which, oh, by the way, are the Fortune 500 companies, are not spending and they're looking to cut costs. And who do you cut first? You cut the expensive consultant. And I don't see any positive things in the future.
Yeah, like architectural billings are down.
Yeah.
That is a leading indicator because they have to spend money on architecture costs before they build anything. So if architectural billings are down, that means construction is going to be down.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we haven't talked about, and it's really gotten lost in everything that's going on, is that, hidden in the unemployment data are 300,000 census taking jobs.
Yeah, that's
and,
true.
So those, I think the census ends at the end of this month.
I do. I think you're right. Yes.
So those folks who are going to go back to being unemployed,
yeah, that's true,
and or underemployed to the extent that they're doing this as a second job. We've also talked in the past about the unemployment data, perhaps overcounting jobs even in good times because the people are taking more than one job. So, but the end of the census data collection won't be good, right, for this. So I don't know if I agree with you that it's going to be over 1 million so quickly, but I do think that we're going to get there. We're going to see those numbers again. Yeah. This fall. And
yeah, I like putting it out there. Just again, we've been watching this stuff for 20 years. It's part of my business, and I believe me, I would like nothing more than to see unemployment go under 300,000. Right? I would like nothing more.
Yeah.
I just don't see it happening. It's going to go up. I think we hit 1 million again sometime in October.
Yeah, so. I agree. And it looks now with, I think we're running into some dangerous economic realities very soon, because it looks like, even though it looked that like the Democrats and Republicans might kind of get around to agreeing on a new stimulus package now, with the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Trump pushing through a replacement, that has just thrown everything into chaos. And it's just it's just going to kind of overshadow everything.
It's suddenly the number one priority.
Yeah. And so this is now going to distract from working on the stimulus bill, to the extent that it's just going to make it even harder for them to agree on anything, if they're now like really going to be at each other's throats over the Supreme Court. So that does not bode well for for where things are going. And I wanted to actually, sort of in connection with this, so there was some interesting statistics that came up today. Let me see if I can find where these are. So reading an article on CNBC about this enhanced unemployment benefit issue. And one of the things that was interesting about this article is it said that, the $300 additional dollars that Trump took from the emergency fund and allocated it to unemployment, which only lasted 6 weeks, $44 billion. They've now spent 39 of the 44. So it's running out very soon. Means that most people are going to be, if they're still unemployed, going to be reverting back to just the state unemployment that they typically get. Which averages across the country $305 a week, right? So, and in some states, like in the Deep South, it's as low as like $180 a week.
Oh yeah, it's scary. Yeah, I've seen those.
So I just went and I thought, okay, what is the average rent on a 2-bedroom apartment across the United States?
Okay.
And the average rent is $1,463 for a 2-bedroom apartment across the United States. Okay. Now I didn't get the better thing to do would be to go really state by state or metro by metro and look at this and compare it to the unemployment benefits. But in the interest of time, I wasn't able to do that. But to your point, there's a ratio in there. I see where you're going. Yeah. The
thing is that if you're talking about,
there's basically 4.29 weeks in a month. Right. If you multiply $305 by 4.29, you come out with $1,308.
Yeah.
Right. And the average rent is $1,463.
Not good.
So this is not going to be good. And on top of that, if you start digging in to data about who is unemployed, you and I have talked about this before in the context of the Great Recession. People with college degrees not as affected. People without college degrees much more affected. Also, people with college degrees without college degrees tend to be renters, right? Except in the big metros like New York and San Francisco, where real estate prices are so ridiculously high that even a lot of people with college degrees can't afford to buy homes. If you're talking about metros like, a lot of the southern metros where housing costs are much cheaper, you really do have much more breaking down along these same lines. But now at the end of August, and this is a little bit of, these aren't exact because I was looking at a graph and trying to sort of eyeball it and figure out, but just not so much, don't be concerned so much about the exact stats, but just about the differences between the groups. Okay. So at the end of August, unemployment was around, 8.6, 8.7%, kind of where we are now. People with bachelor's degrees, unemployment was about 6%. If you have 2 years of college, it's 8%. People with only a high school education, 10%. Less than high school, 13%. So if you're looking at, the renter group being disproportionately people who don't have bachelor's degrees just talking across the whole country, who is renting, you're talking about a higher rate of unemployment than that, 8.7% or whatever it is showing you. Right? So that's the point of what I made this point before about how recessions affect rentals and how, the great financial crisis when all those people got foreclosed who were renters, then became homeowners, and had to go back to renting. If you look at, depends on when you slice the data, it looks like, oh, great, in a recession, more people rent, but that's ignoring the whole context of that, why those people weren't renting in the first place, et cetera, right? So you have, again, I think we're going to see a situation where properties at the lower end of the spectrum are going to start to suffer.
Yeah, I would tell you Class C cash paying tenants are most at risk. I think that's something we are clearly seeing, right? They're selling hours, meaning physical labor hours.
Yep.
And a lot of that stuff doesn't exist, or, exist in reduced amounts for sure. Yeah. So it's not a good look.
And I think like a lot, so all those people who were getting that $600 a month and they were doing better than they were actually when they were employed in some cases, if once that 600 goes away and the 300 goes away, if they've burned through that money, then they're going to have problems. And then another interesting thing that I found is, let's see. So the Census Bureau has put together this household pulse survey. It's a new collection of data that they put together to try to measure the impact of COVID.
Oh, okay.
And one of the things that one of the pieces of this survey is talking about expected loss in employment income. And you can search by state, you can search by metro, and you can search by education and stuff like that. But we're seeing now the expectations. So people expected loss in employment income. This is, like for instance, in California right now, 34% of the people responding to the survey expect to see a loss in income in the next 4 weeks.
Wow.
So
sheesh.
Nevada, 34%. So those are the two highest. New York is at 32%, Texas, 29%. So you're seeing, this is kind of measuring in real time where people are feeling that the economy is going. And if they're anticipating a loss of income, they're going to spend less money, and that's going to have a ripple effect through the economy. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where then they spend less money, the people, the stores have less money, they lay more people off, and it just becomes
nasty,
a vicious cycle. So, so this is kind of like the economic reality that we're seeing, and I don't think it's going to get better if we have a surge in COVID cases, which I think is absolutely going to happen, and if there's no government stimulus to pick up the slack.
Yeah, you
can see like the apartment industry is kind of losing its mind right now.
Yeah,
they are lobbying very hard. They want Congress to pass additional stimulus. They want it to be focused on rent payments, of course, because that's what they want. And nothing is happening. And you can kind of read between the lines, the quotes from the NMHC and stuff about how desperate they're starting to feel. And this is for, the apartments lobby really represents the institutional
Class A,
Class B. And if they're scared, then what's happening at the other end of the market. So I think that there's a lot of choppiness to come, and yet apartment prices seem to show no signs of abating.
Right.
And the amount of I'm watching people raising incredible amounts of money incredibly quickly to pour into apartments. And like I know I'm involved in a deal, and that's been very popular, the subscription rate to that. Like I said before, I feel very comfortable with this deal because it is a Class A- deal in a metro that's receiving a lot of inflows. But I don't see these other deals. I don't look at them. I don't know what's going on. I just see people bragging about how much money they're raising.
Right.
And I don't know if the fundamentals are there. So it looks like the stock market to me right now, in that it's kind of untethered from
reality. Yeah. Well, let's switch it up. This is something I've been thinking about. I actually interviewed Stephen Roach, I don't know, 6 weeks ago or so, co-interviewed him. There was another guy who helped me interview him. But he talked about in that interview, and he's actually out today, I think it was Bloomberg, it might've been the Wall Street Journal, talking about the odds of a double dip recession greater than 50%. I don't know if you've seen that or if you've given any thought, but
I didn't see it, but I mean, I think, yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, especially when you're talking about sort of like the technical definition of a recession, right? Like we're technically in a recovery now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Q1, Q2
like,
down, Q3 up, then we start again, right? Q4, Q1 negative, double dip.
But it's sort of like, but I don't think anybody feels like, woohoo, that we're in a recovery, because we're not in a boom stage yet. We haven't even made it back to where we were. I think if you talk about the technical definition of a recession, meaning contraction for 2 quarters, yeah, I think the chances are really high, just because once the shutdowns start happening again, then
that's interesting.
It's just inevitable.
I think I think this is pretty interesting. I think you and I both agree that a chance of a double dip recession are better than not, but I don't see anybody else talking about it. Stephen Roach is the one guy, and he's been calling for it for a while, so good on him. But back to your point, the Wall Street's not acting like double dip. I would tell you apartments aren't acting like a double dip. There's still a lot of hot money out there, and I think we really got to start thinking about a double dip recession being real, which means Q1 or Q4 and Q1 are going to be negative GDP growth.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I've seen some prominent equities investors out there talking about, not so they haven't used the recession word,
okay,
but what they have been saying essentially is like, it's not time to be buying stocks right now. This is a speculative bubble, and the underlying fundamentals don't measure up, and we still have this essentially this income cliff that really hasn't played its way through yet, right?
Yeah.
So
I totally agree.
People are still getting some supplemental unemployment. Some people are still going back to work, but what you see is businesses really struggling to make it. And I think some of them have struggled to make it, and they've made it thus far, especially, the restaurant business and stuff. They've made it this far. But once the cold weather sets in, it's going to be very tough for them to survive on, even like in New York City, where we're finally moving to 25% indoor seating capacity soon. I don't know how they survive on 25%.
You can't. I mean, I just don't understand how this works out. I mean, I think about restaurants a lot. I see the data, but even movie theaters, right? I'm starting to hear from people go. I know a couple people that have been to movie theaters in the last 3 or 4 weeks. And are like, there's 4 people there.
Yeah.
I'm like, why? I mean, at some point, just the electricity, is. I mean, at some point, you just save money by shutting it down.
Yeah. And I hear anecdotally about restaurants that are crowded, and I think they're definitely, I mean, it's kind of crazy, like how politicized this has become.
Yeah.
But like people are making like a political statement by going to restaurants and not wearing masks.
Yeah,
and
they're going on purpose to create a crowd. Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, and just the thing that the way that these things always work, like it is true that most people will not get COVID, right? So it's just like everything else. Like most people will not get it. And so all of the people who believe it's BS, who then don't get it, will then say, see, I was right.
Yep.
It was nothing to worry about because I didn't get it. And like, I don't know anybody who died from it. Right.
Yep.
And so, but that doesn't mean it wasn't serious.
Real, yeah.
It wasn't real, or it wasn't. And so the COVID debate, I mean, just in the same way that like the culture war from the 60s has never died, and it won't die until the baby boomers all finally expire. Like we're going to have the COVID culture wars for the rest of our lives. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, this is going to never end. And it's really depressing to me.
Yeah, I totally agree. Let's turn this into a happier conversation for the last 10 minutes or so. I even find myself getting depressed, and that's not who I am, right? I'm generally a positive person. I look for the opportunities. I generally am a happy person, but this year, 2020 has been rough. So what I want to do is I want to talk to you about 2025, right? 2025. And I just want to ask you a couple of questions, your opinion, your crystal ball. It's obviously so far in the future, we won't hold you to any of this, but I just want to think, what's it going to be like when this is finally behind us? And I think 2025 is far enough behind us that we're on to the next growth phase, in my opinion. That's why I picked it. So let's talk, and again, this would be single family homes related. So let's first talk 30-year mortgages. Let's assume today the average 30-year mortgage is 3%, just to pick a number. What do you think the 30-year mortgage is in 2025? Do you think it's above or below 4%? Or do you know?
I think it's probably still below.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's probably might be below for the decade. But yeah, so
yeah,
30-year debt still cheap in 2025.
Yeah.
Fair?
Yeah, I agree.
How about single family home ownership? Now, this is a number you may not track, so I'll give you some facts. As of today, the number is roughly 66%. I'm rounding for an even number. During the peak of the 06, lending, whatever you want to call that, fiasco, some people say it was 70, some people say it was 71, because there was that 3 or 4% that just never should have bought that were technically owners for a little window. I'm curious, urban flight going on. You got some class A millennials that are now in their 30s, which my daughter is knocking on the door of 30. She's a millennial. They will eventually, most of them have kids probably and want bigger, space is good. Do you see the home ownership rate in 2025 being above 66%, which we'll call it today, the same or below?
Well, I don't know how it can really climb back up to 70 without the same issues as happened last time, where people who just really weren't qualified were able to buy, right? And unless we are kind of economically healthier as a country than we think, I don't see how we push that percentage unless people really start moving far out to much more affordable places. Like if people start reversing some of the rural population decline and move out to areas that are, that have been declining for decades, 100 years. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, like seriously, since industrialization got really underway and cars became popular, like
essentially the Great Depression was the impetus, right, to move from the urban.
Yeah. I mean, if you look from the rural areas, right? And if you look at stats of like rural areas, just the demographic stats, you see there are a lot of places around the country that their peak population was in like 1920.
Yeah, right? You're right.
And they've been declining slowly ever since. And it doesn't matter where, because it's not like a north-south thing. It's an urban-rural thing. So even in the high growth states, the growth is very concentrated, right? It's not, the rural areas have just never stopped this slow grind of decline, right? And because of that, housing is really cheap in a lot of these places, right? So if people, maybe because of work from home, they're going to move to some of these outlying areas where things are really cheap, maybe you push it to 70% again.
But do you think it gets to 68? I mean, do you think it goes up a point or two?
I don't know, to be honest with you.
Fair enough.
I really don't, because 65% is the long-term average, right? For like forever. And I mean, get pushed up a point to 66 on a long-term basis. Yeah, maybe this is the thing that would do it. But I think it really depends on, the other thing too is like you have to think about if it's because people are moving from like big metros into the suburbs or further out, there's also going to be some people who like sell their houses, so it's just a wash, right? So it's not all renters moving into housing. It's all, into ownership. There are going to be some people who are selling their homes in metros who are then going to buy another home someplace else. So I'm skeptical that it's going to go back up to.
That's
70.
okay. Yeah. Awesome. So the other one to talk about is value. Again, this is really hard because it's a national number, and we both believe real estate is local and the country is tilting, but we got to put a number out there. So the last time I checked, the median national number, which I think was earlier this week, was 318. Let's round it to $320,000. So we have low interest rates in 2025. We have, home ownership roughly the same. What do you think values are? Do you think values stay flat? Do you think they go up, down? 2025.
Yeah, again, because you're going to have, if this continues, and you're going to have, some of the more expensive areas probably declining in value.
For sure.
Just as some of the outlying areas may be going up in value. So it may be a wash.
Okay.
But I don't see, I find it hard to imagine that 5 years from now, we're going to have a major, like that things are going to be significantly cheaper than they are now. Right. I think that they'll be kind of where they are or more expensive.
Okay.
Because of, frankly, cheap interest rates over that long period of time, which just has a tendency to drive housing prices even higher. And there's also been, something that we haven't really talked about, but one reason, like this, the ever rising house prices that are driven by low interest rates have this kind of tendency it has the tendency to feed upon itself, because what happens is, as prices go up, you'd think, well, prices go up, so more people are going to sell.
Right.
But that's actually not what's happened, right? Inventory is low because people don't want to sell, because where are they going to go?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially if they want to move, if they just want to make a move in their neighborhood, like to upsize, trade up, which is what people used to do.
Yeah.
Now they can't trade up because
their
housing costs are going to go up so much, even with low interest rates, as to where they are now. They can't do it. So their only option is to move somewhere else that's cheaper. And not everybody wants to do that, because
totally agree.
They don't want to move, or their kids are in school, or what have you.
Yep.
So it's created an inventory problem. But then, because inventory is so low, the people who do need to buy houses bid them up even more. And it just creates this vicious cycle of ever increasing prices, and people getting stretched thinner and thinner. I think interest rates are really at the root of all this. And until interest rates go up, we're going to continue to have this problem.
Yeah. So. All right. Last question about 2025, and it's because we're both investors. You actually shared the number earlier. It's the same number I had. Let's call average rent $1,400. Again, it's hard to do that, right? Do you think the average rent for an affordable house goes up or down by 2025?
It's really hard to say, but probably up by how much, I don't know. Yeah. But if it's 5 years, I'd say it'll be more than it is.
It's got to be more than today, right?
Yeah. Whether that's $10 a month more or $50 a month more, it's really hard to say, or $100 a month more. I think it really depends on, once we do come out of COVID, how much damage we have to undo to the economy after that. And I think what I've been seeing is that I think there's a good argument that this is going to be similar to the recovery from the Great Recession, slow.
Yeah.
And, just like, it's going to take a long time to work our way out of this, because we're so burdened by debt, which slows growth. Right.
And you got to service it. Yep.
And the economic and the economic levers become less and less effective. So, lowering interest rates doesn't help that much. And, it's hard to juice the economy. And like you said, there's so much debt service so much money is going into just servicing debt and not into growing businesses and growing the economy, that's going to be a drag. And, I think we'll have recovery, but I think it's going to be a slow,
Yeah. Before I wrap this up, I want to share some logic. So I was interviewed by the Business Journal a couple of days ago, and they basically asked me, as a landlord of houses, what do you think the outcome of the CDC order is going to be on single family home rentals? And I said, well, you got to remember, all single family homes aren't the same, right? I focus on affordable single family homes. So I make sure to qualify that. And I told them that I believe that the CDC order is going to be just like rent control in a year or two. And what I meant by that is we are going to see mom and pop landlords. I think a lot of people are going to lose them, right? They're actually going to have foreclosed or short sale. But two, I said, many of the mom and pop landlords are going to get through this. But when they get through it, and it's March, it's April, it's May next year, they're going to be like, I'm done. I'm going to give my tenant a 60-day notice. I'm going to go clean up the property, and I'm going to sell it, because what is hot today? Single family homes. So what I told them is, I believe we are going to see a significant drop in available affordable houses for rent. And, basically that basically the CDC order is going to be like rent control. The people that it helps today, they're going to win. It's going to hurt landlords, for the duration of the process. But longer term, landlords own the asset. They're just going to clean it up and sell it, put it in the open market for owners. And who loses? Tenants. I believe single family rentals in the affordable bucket, a lot less inventory, which in my world means higher rents because the demand's not going to go away. Does that logic hold?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very logical argument. I saw something today about how Wall Street is continuing to make further bets on rental single family homes in the suburbs. But I didn't dig into what whether they're talking about sort of luxury homes in the suburbs that they're going to rent out, or whether it's affordable housing. So I don't know, but I think this subject is open to debate, right? Like how does this play out? Does it mean that fewer people can afford to buy, so they are going to have to rent, and the suburbs become more renter nation, or is it I don't know. Or is it going the other way? And it's really hard to kind of.
Well, I think you can have both currents. I actually think you can have both. I think there's legacy owners are going to be frustrated and like, I'm out, but you could still have increased demand. Those aren't connected things. So yeah, I feel really good about my rentals longer term. I think, the next 6 months are going to be rough. So I know you got to go. You got an important call here in about 6 minutes. So I will respect your time, Jonathan, and we will talk next week. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks. Take care. See ya.